papers over everything and anything. What happened to the land of the free, the home of the brave, not the home of the hypersensitive, deeply shocked, overly outraged, feigned moral outrage when there is nothing to be outraged? It goes way beyond sports or a fight at a hockey game. It's those people that are offended that people get in the octagon and, like gladiators, battle it out. It's about all the facts about our entertainment, a culture that seems to run on never-ending